there should be no hard questions, right? There's no such thing as a hard question.
A while back, there was some problems, some controversy around KDTalks. I think it would be good to kind of clear the air on that.
Hey, welcome everybody.
Hey everyone. You can unmute yourself, guys. It's fine now.
Feel free to chat.
Hello.
Hello.
How's everyone doing?
Lots
of
chat
well.
already.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you guys all on board. This was very awesome. So we might as well get the show started. So welcome everyone to the first episode of KDTalks. This is a series we're going to dive deep into the Kadena blockchain, discuss the unique features, the use cases, and potential benefits for businesses and individuals alike. Our expert panel is going to try to include members from the Kadena team. For example, today we have the great Emily Pillmore and Will Martino joining us. And then we're also going to have community members from around the ecosystem. Like today, we have Sterling Long from DadBod. So hopefully these discussions will bring the community closer together and help broaden the Kadena ecosystem as a whole. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the stream, and we're just going to start off with some quick introductions from everyone, starting with my co-host, the great Alfonso, right next to me. So take it away.
Hey guys. How's everyone doing? Thanks a lot for being here, guys. Just wanted to give a little bit of a rundown on the vision of the show, why you decided to go with this. Back in September, we started talking, KDL Launch and Kadena Ecosystem or Eucalyptus Labs, about doing a community show where we can have Kadena actually talking with someone from the ecosystem, because I think it's very good for you guys at Kadena and for everyone in the community to kind of listen to this back and forth of what the ecosystem people feel or how they feel about the Kadena blockchain. And you can kind of lead on what you think is happening behind the scenes that we cannot see. So we had this vision. Fortunately, I was fortunate enough to talk to some of the Kadena guys in Miami when I was there in November, I think, and we set this up. And so I'm very, very happy to have Will and Emily and Sterling for our first show. I think we couldn't have had better guests for the kickoff, so to speak. And so Will, Emily, and Sterling, if you want to give a little bit rundown on your introductions. I don't think it will be a long one. Everyone knows you, but go ahead.
Sure. Thanks for having us. I guess I'll go first. Will Martino, co-founder and president of Kadena. Before founding Kadena, I was at the SEC, helped to build, I was the founding tech lead for their cryptocurrency working group, built their high-frequency trading data analysis system and kind of their supercomputing cluster, and then went to JP Morgan, met Stuart, built the Blockchain Center for Excellence, built the first blockchain, got, just worn down by trying to do industrial blockchain with the existing technology stack with Ethereum, and we left and built our own thing, and now it's, 6, 7, 8 years later. I really need to have this queued up so that I remember how long it's been. It's been a while. 8 years? Oh my God.
You're muted, Emily, just so you know.
Oh man. Yeah, it was 2015, wasn't it?
I think it was 16. I don't know. You can look it up.
Okay.
Just blurs together.
Yeah. Well, it's 2030. What are you doing?
Still Kadena, probably. Looking forward to that.
I'm glad to be here on this 23rd day of February in 2035. All right. My name is Emily Pillmore. I'm the current team lead for the Pact language crew. And that includes folks like John Wigley and working with Stuart and the great team we have in Jose and Robert and a few and Greg and a few others from time to time. My background is mostly in building systems and in finance. I started with Goldman Sachs. I moved to Disney doing live streaming and video on demand for things like NHL and Major League Baseball, and got back into finance through the Haskell connection with Kadena, and I've kind of been here ever since, almost continuously, except for a year where I took off to be CTO of the Haskell Foundation nonprofit supporting the Haskell language. So my role at Kadena is primarily the person who does all things packed and interacts with the community and sort of builds out the ecosystem for everyone as best I can.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I'm Sterling Long, Lazadica Long. I'm nervous.
No need for that.
No, I gotta treat it as excitement, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I guess I jumped into Pact and smart contract development last year. I wrote one smart contract in Solidity, read at least 20 others, and decided that I didn't like it all that much. Came across Pact and was like, this is a lot cooler. It's interpreted. I can really appreciate that. There's a lot of cool things you can do with that. The capabilities, there's a lot of cool things you can do. I appreciated all of the pieces that I felt that they solved. Gas stations being a fundamental tool that I felt was required for mass adoption. My background, I guess I've just been programming since I was 11, making video games, mobile apps. I left a company that I started with my brother called LZ Tech that was building global supply chain management systems for companies in China and Guatemala and the US to pursue my dreams of just building video games and blockchain related tools. Repeat that. Building video games and tools for blockchain, on blockchain.
Okay. Sounds nice. Thanks for all the introductions, guys. So going to you, Sterling, we want to start with you because you recently did an announcement that was kind of surprising for some people, saying that by the end of next month, you'll be, going away from developing in Kadena. You were pretty thorough in your explanation, but for the people who didn't catch that, and for everyone who's kind of we lost. I think we lost someone, but we lost Emily, but that's fine.
She'll be back.
Yeah, she'll be back. For those who kind of missed that, can you go through why you decided that and what you think needs to change in the Kadena ecosystem?
Yeah, so my decision to go, there's lots of different facets of this, but just kind of beginning at the very center and kind of treating it like an onion and working my way outwards. Beginning at the very center, I feel that Kadena as a blockchain can scale incredibly well. So you can add more chains and you can increase the transactions per second by doing that. But that the D apps that exist on top of Kadena will struggle to scale as new chains are added. And not to say that this isn't something that can be resolved. If you have the appropriate tools to scale your D app and to add additional chains and to effectively make your D app chainless, you can definitely scale. There's just a great deal of work that needs to happen before that's from my point of view as a developer, there's a great deal of work that needs to happen before that is just an easy thing to do for a developer, before it just works. And developers really appreciate it when you can work with things that just work. You just plug it in and it just goes. So that's kind of the foundational piece of it is you have this, at the current point in time, difficult to use layer one in terms of scaling. The second layer of that is I feel that the current team or just production of those tools from my own point of view has been just lacking. And I don't want to shoot down Emily or Will or anybody like that. I don't want to spread hate or FUD or anything like that. It's just there are things that we as developers need. And when it takes 5 months for those things to get pushed through, like for example, in order for me to make a multi-chain IDO, I needed QuickSign. And QuickSign sat in a KIP for, I believe it was 5 months. And there were only a couple of statements based on that KIP. And so as a developer, I felt constrained. There was nothing that I would post my comments and I would bump it and I would ask for feedback. And then finally last month it got merged. So like just the speed of progress towards building the tools that developers need to make a multi-chain and chainless experience are slow coming from my point of view. And then the last thing is Kadena is the first blockchain I've ever built on. And there are multiple other chains that are coming out that offer similar functionality. And I would like to go and learn those as well. Simply put, I cannot state that Kadena has the best solution because I don't know what the other solutions are. And I haven't experienced those. And so from my point of view, I would like to go and experience and learn some of these other blockchains. And I won't even call them blockchains. Some of them are just distributed ledgers. And learn how they work, build on them, test some things out. And from that, I believe that I can make more intelligent decisions as far as, yes, Kadena is the right solution, or no, Kadena isn't a place where I want to be in the long run. So those are my kind of 3 layers moving outwards as far as why I've decided to go.
So as far as the third one, I there's no one to direct it to because it's your own, state of mind and decision to do so. It's fine. As for the first two, I think the first one might be a good one for Will to kind of go at because he's the designer and the creator of Chainweb, and so this scalability thing and how it can be resolved or if it's already resolved, it's kind of, I think it's a good question for you, Will, if you want to go at it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so first I actually want to say something to the third one. Take a look at Mina protocol, because Mina is really cool and it's very different, and it's something that I wish that I had more time to dig into. Wow, I am just very jittery in this video.
Yeah.
So if you're like looking for things to go and look into, Mina is like one that I would suggest. Like, I keep an eye on that because I think they're doing some very interesting stuff on the ZK side. But yeah, so for the scalability thing, so part of the way that we do development is that it is very much demand driven, and I would say that you're able to scale up an app to the needs of what a app needs on our platform now with the tools that are at hand. It's just that if you want to have something that can run in parallel trivially on 1,000 chains, we haven't built that yet because just the need for it isn't that much there. So, very basic things of let's say you have like you're doing a token sale and you just put a contract out on multiple chains, and then you split it into, you take X, like you just split it, you put on 5 chains, you split the number of tokens you're selling, and between 5 contracts on 5 different chains, and then it runs in parallel. Yes, there are some issues with that approach, but overall, that's a reasonable approach to scaling, I'd say, for at least the stuff that is currently being worked on. In general, what we liked and the way that we designed Chainweb was so that developers would have the primitives needed, very much like when multi-core CPUs first came out. The primitives were there, but it took a very long time. It took probably 20 years for multi-core programming to be something that you could actually simply do without having to have a deep knowledge of how the kernel works and how the CPU works, and how L1 versus L2 versus L3 caching works. So that's kind of like my mindset with it, where we have ideas for tools and how you would be able to structure this and have a much more seamless developer experience for being able to build and just deploy multi-chain contracts, just immediately. But we don't find it as much of a priority as, for example, Kadena.js, so redoing our entire front end. So we have GraphQL, and we have proper event management. We have all the other stuff that a lot of the other platforms need. And that's definitely, part of that lacking is because we were Haskell developers. We never had a JavaScript developer on staff early. And we've been looking for one for years. And it took me, I think we've been looking for one for 4 years when I met Randy and finally found the right guy to go and build this out. And he's crushing it, but it just takes time. So I had to scale up his entire team, had to, first he had to learn Kadena and all the weirdness of working on a blockchain system, and then build out the team and then go and actually build out the system. And now it's in beta, and I think the proper V1 will be out. I would be shocked if it isn't out this year. And once we have that, then it's easier to make these next steps for these other tools. But a big part of it is we don't want to build the tools with an ancient API that we know we're going to be completely redoing. Especially when you're managing a large team, it can be really difficult to say go fully document and fully give tons of examples of tons of other stuff for this API that you're also going to be working on a next version of. that'll actually be a lot easier for people to use. So a bit of it's about priority, and this is partially why I like crypto winters, because you have time to build and the pressure isn't on as much as, let's say, when this winter ends and then everything starts going crazy again. It's going to be really hard for us to do, big things in a very compressed time scale, and people are going to need it. So a lot of it is just like rebuilding chunks of the foundation that we know we need a lot of work on. And then once we get past that, then being able to go and address these kind of bigger issues. Like, for example, we just got a response from Ledger, and we finally got a response from them for the integration for the hardware wallet. And now that we have that, we can go and do the next step. But it's just very classic. Like, it just takes a very long time to get this stuff done. And part of that is because we're interpreted, that actually made Ledger integration ridiculously hard, because we didn't have this really compact transaction that would actually fit in the memory for the older Ledger devices. So we had to prioritize, like, you're doing a big contract. Let's say you're signing a contract that you're deploying. That doesn't fit on any hardware wallet. So some choices need to be made. Also figuring out how like caps work and things like that, because we have capabilities and they are better and they are safer, but no one else has it. So then, like, how do you get the hardware wallet to be safe, but also with a UX that isn't awful? And then you combine all of that with, okay, it takes forever to actually get this stuff rolled out. So does that answer the question, or did I go off on a tangent by accident?
No, I think that answers the question. But I have a couple of points that I'd like to bring to play. For example, I recognize the need to rebuild the API. And when you say API, I'm assuming that you mean like the packed API and perhaps the chain web node. For example, like the packed API, I recognize that at the current point, in its current state, it is really annoying to use, and it should be recreated in some way so that you don't have to send a transaction to an individual chain to have it executed on that chain, right? It'd be super nice if I could just send in a list of commands that I need executed, and then the chain web node just splits that command up and just sends it to the appropriate chain based on the metadata that's in the command. So I like rebuilding the API and all that good stuff. I wholly recognize the need for that. From my point of view, a lot of the tools, however, they aren't wholly dependent on the packed API. Let's say, for example, like the Kadena wallet signing API, the standard that you guys have created for DApps to communicate with wallets. The documentation for that standard is effectively in its current state just very broken. It's not complete. There's a lot of undefined in there, and honestly, each wallet has kind of implemented it in its own way. So Zelcore has implemented the signing API in a different way. The next wallet has implemented it, and from my point of view, this is because there hasn't been a good focus or a consistent focus on let's build standards that work for the Kadena ecosystem, and let's really focus in on that. And make it so that it's very easy and very clear how to communicate with wallets and how to communicate with the chain. It only takes you a couple of hours to write some documentation for current implementations and things like that, from my point of view, right? If you've built the system, if you've built it, it doesn't take a lot of time to write a short description on, hey, here's how you use it. And so I understand the need to rebuild APIs and make them more conducive to a chainless interaction, but that shouldn't justify abandoning these other very important pieces that are required for your ecosystem to flourish. For example, Marmalade tutorials. And again, documentation on how you communicate with wallets and making sure that wallets abide by that standard so that developers don't have to make a different implementation for the sign API every single time they try to talk with a different wallet. Things like this need more information. And going a little bit beyond that as well is really solid tutorials, like building a solid tutorial or just a description of the flow of Marmalade and how it's meant to work would be very beneficial to a lot of people who are trying to come to Kadena and launch NFTs or use the Marmalade standard to solve some real world use case that just doesn't really, there's no place to go for that right now.
Emily, maybe you want to jump in and give a...
Yeah. So this is a tough one because writing documentation is hard. And I mean that in the lightest sense of the word hard. It's hard to maintain as things improve and semantics change. And it is a huge expenditure in terms of developer hours to get these things up to date. So not to make excuses, because I think Sterling is spot on with his feedback here. But one of the things that we sort of didn't prioritize very early on in favor of just delivering the thing and hoping that people kind of could read a REST API, like an open API spec, and derive it for themselves. We, I believe, made a mistake, and we acknowledged that we kind of made a mistake internally by not focusing on user and developer experience very early on, right? So one of the things that we've been focusing on for the past year and a half is not just, how do we maintain the existing features and do bug fixes and all this other stuff, but also how do we get ourselves on track and onboard people so that we can, expand the knowledge base and maybe take some of that load off of ourselves and hopefully get this sort of documentation and tutorial driven standard writing process to be sort of self-contained and self-consistent without our help. This is a realization that came relatively, I don't want to say late, because I don't think 2 years is that late. I think there's a lot of history that needs to be taken into account. No other blockchain really rolls out with this kind of stuff, with at least like complicated features that need to be, really in-depth explained and explored. But we're working on it. And there are some places that we need to work on it a little bit harder, I think. And the KIP process is definitely one of those. It's a problem of manpower for us. We don't have enough people to constantly sort of field discussions, or the know-how internally to sort of branch off and sort of delegate this to other people. So there's very few people that have a very sort of high-level view, enough so that they can contribute to standards. So for instance, on the Marmalade project, I think it was Stuart, Hee-Kyun, and one other guy who has since left us, who was guiding that process. But both of those people are extremely busy. So who do we delegate to handle these sorts of complaints from developers or dialogue with developers? And I think it's something that we're going to have to look at internally as we sort of build up our DX and UX processes, to sort of figure out what kind of time we can allocate to fielding discussions with the community members and handling these kinds of requests. And I think we'll get better at it, because it is on our radar and it's something that we're working towards. But you're right, we're not there yet. And we weren't there like a year ago. So the best I can say is we're working on it, and we are hiring for it. So hopefully this speeds things up for everyone.
Nice. I don't know, Will or Sterling, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah. So from my experience working with open source projects and contributing to them, the first thing that any open source project must do is clearly lay out the rules for how you contribute and make a very clear path, so that it's very like there's step one, step two, step three. Here is how you, a developer who are working with us, help us improve. Mm-hmm. And building that into the GitHub repo is honestly not overly difficult. So from my perspective, there are a couple very easy actions that you can take that would have a massive impact on the developer's experience building on Kadena. First and foremost, you can just write a simple quick start guide and perhaps definitions for the Marmalade standard. And actually thinking about that now. I'm actually planning on doing this, so you can scratch that. I'm gonna do that for you. I'm gonna submit a PR for that. But having a clear path for contributing to the major repos that you have is the best way to get developers like me who are interested in Kadena, who want to support Kadena, involved. I spoke with Max Howell, the founder or the creator of Homebrew. And Homebrew is for people who don't know, Homebrew is one of the biggest package managers, if not the biggest. I don't know analytics on that, but one of the largest package managers in essentially the world for installing packages on Linux and Mac OS systems. And when I spoke with him, I asked him, I was like, how did you get so many people to use Homebrew? Like, what set you apart from other package managers, and what has caused Homebrew to just continuously thrive and to be the go-to tool when I'm trying to install a package so that I can use on my command line interface? And the thing he told me was, I built the way to contribute into the tool. I made it insanely easy for someone to fix a bug, to add new functionality, etc. And that statement has kind of stuck with me as the foundation of any open source project is a clear path for contributors to actually help you build. And that it would effectively be my invitation for you guys, is to get a GitHub guy or a GitHub gal. I don't really care what, just a GitHub guy or gal who is on GitHub looking at pull requests, fleshing out the documentation for how you contribute to this repo, chain web node. How do you contribute to it? Building out that process. The documentation for the Kadena wallet signing API, how you contribute to that. What else? There's a third one. It's escaping me right now, but get a GitHub guy or gal that is there looking at these pull requests, looking at these issues, and creating discussion on them, who is there to help you guys manage your time and be more directed. Because, Emily, you don't need to go and look at every single issue that's created for the chain web node. That's just too much. But having someone who is there, having someone who is there to help you do that, so that they can be like, oh, this issue, I know what this is about. I can help solve this, and Emily doesn't need to worry about it. And then they can ping you if it's a more complicated answer, or perhaps you're working on it, something like that. Either way, having someone at the helm there who is steering that and who is driving the community engagement forward, along with those steps to contribute, has been one of the hallmark pieces of every other open source project I've seen. And Kadena needs that. You need someone who is steering the ship in that way so that contributors and you guys can connect. Right now, there's a massive disconnect there. What I'm describing is perhaps one strategy for accomplishing this, but it's the best strategy, and a strategy that I've seen and work in Wallet Connect, in Godot, two really massive open source projects that have lots of contributors. Godot has hundreds, if not over 1,000 contributors, and they crush it. And there's a guy, whenever I post an issue on Godot, there's a guy who always responds. He's like, this is this, and he tags the people who need to know about it. There's a lot of power in that organization, or in that structure of having that Godot person who routes the requests and issues to the people who must know, and who pushes them forward, closes them, all that good stuff. So that's, from my point of view, that's just a strategic suggestion that you guys could make. And if Randy has 12 developers on his JS side of things, I think it's totally reasonable to just take one of those people and put them onto your job now is to push forward community involvement and to make it easy, insanely easy and fun and enjoyable for anyone who's building on Kadena to contribute to our ecosystem and to build this layer one and the tools that exist here.
All right. So I like that take. I like that take, but I'm going to push back on several points here. Having actually maintained a massive open source library to the tune of several thousand stars on GitHub with many hundreds, if not thousands, of contributors over many years, Scala Z actually was the one that I was maintaining for a very long time. There needs to be a distinction between what kind of people you want contributing to your project. And while in some cases, the case, in like the case of Brew, for example, or in the case of any package manager where you have many sort of drive-by contributions, it's really good to have, an easy, quick start and sort of fast contribution guide, templates and all that stuff for getting pull requests submitted to your project, because you don't actually have them touching core parts of the code that are going to make very significant impacts on the semantics and operational, sufficiency of the code itself. What you want in order to improve a protocol, something with very complicated semantics or perhaps needs a higher degree of contributor, is to focus on very core contributors and really cultivate people when they come along and say, I want to contribute code to your project. So I am on board with something like what Sterling is saying for some of our projects, but not all of our projects. And I would definitely not want that for something like Pact. I welcome drive-by contributions in the form of documentation and, small changes to the Haskell code if people are able to contribute this. But I wouldn't want a bunch of people constantly creating churn on the internals of the code. And that's where something like a core developer or a small subset of core developers is really, really necessary. And I think it would be helpful for Kadena to actually identify what projects we want a very strong core contributor base on versus many sort of opinions, in the mix, right? Because you do have a problem with, too many cooks in the case of very complicated things. Too many cooks are going to, contribute too many opinions, and then the direction gets lost. But I do agree that something like a contributor document or quick start guides are very low-hanging fruit that we can, obviously do on all of our projects. It just doesn't make a ton of sense for something like Chain Web Node. Like, what are you going to do on Chain Web Node? Change consensus? I mean, what's going to happen on Pact? I mean, we get documentation changes and we merge those almost immediately with little delay if somebody finds a typo or contributes, changes to Haskell code even, which we've had in the latest release. But I think the thing that you're really poking at is where there needs to be engagement, we have not engaged in a different way. And we do need to. We do need somebody to sort of load balance our KIPs and our community-facing projects to make sure that they get served as diligently as we serve our sort of core projects with our core maintainers.
Correct.
Yeah, I want to add some color to that now that my video isn't spazzing out completely. So yeah, I mean, like I agree with most of the stuff that Emily said. And Sterling, I don't disagree really much with some of the stuff you said. I'm just kind of trying to add some color. One piece of it is that one of the things that Stuart and I identified as something that was a mistake that we didn't do back in like our JP Morgan days, and also kind of the early phase of Kadena, is we didn't actually build the DApp ourselves. So there were parts of that developer experience that were blind spots. So for example, Pact or like Chainweb didn't have, or Kadena didn't have events inside of the system because we couldn't figure out why you needed them until we went to go and build our first freaking DApp on the platform and realized that we needed events ASAP. So there were definitely some misses, and and like that has had this like long domino effect that we're still fixing in the DApp developer experience, and like you definitely feel it, and like I feel for you on it. As for the the contributions, like yes, long term we would like a more decentralized developer code base and a broader ecosystem and a broader set of people, like people who aren't even just core paid by Kadena developers for Chainweb Node and for everything else. If we can get to more of a Bitcoin model, that would be absolutely excellent. But those things take a lot of time, and I also think they take a certain market cap for you to hit. and again, I'm going to add just color here of there are significant security concerns with submitted PRs. There is a history in crypto. I think this was back in 2018, maybe, where someone pushed a change to, I think it was one of the WebSocket or one of the data pipeline protocols in NPM that was like 3 dependencies up for one of the wallets. And it ended up being used to hack a bunch of wallets because this exploit that got put in was done by someone who it got put in, and the person who was maintaining that package wasn't really worried about it because it didn't really look like anything. And it turned out that it was actually targeting some wallet that used this as a dep. They didn't notice it. It only triggered for that wallet and screwed up all the encryption and just did a call to home, and people were getting their money stolen. So it is, like with Brew or something, I contributed. I don't know if I have. I think Stu actually did our recipes for Brew. He's contributed to Brew. I'm sure Emily's contributed to Brew. I've worked on plugins for, editors, stuff like that. Yeah. And, at the same time, it's what I'm basically trying to say is it's more complicated when you're dealing with a currency of it's not the answers to this really aren't obvious sometimes. And I'm not excusing ourselves in this. I'm really just adding color. Yes, we could do a better job. There's a lot of things we could have done better before. We probably should have. We definitely should have just focused on public chain and public crypto first and just dropped the entire enterprise thing once we got funding to do the public chain. I think that we'd be a lot further ahead on a lot of other stuff we've worked on. And there was also, that kind of just lead weight or that ball and chain that we we're carrying around for 2 years that was getting in the way of a lot of other stuff. So I'm not excusing ourselves in this. I'm just trying to add some context to, dude, you're totally not wrong.
Yeah, and honestly, Emily and Will, both of those points are incredibly valid. And I would say that from a security standpoint, that makes a ton of sense. Even still, I would still say contributing. We have a vetting process for our contributors for this package because changes in this package have very wide and widespread effects. So either way, having at least something saying it's going to be hard for you to contribute, and any code you do propose to us, we will vet it hardcore, right? And any code, looking at Bitcoin, I've read through Bitcoin's repo as well, but they suggest that, or they actually, require that any submission that you make or any change of the code that you make also comes with unit tests that validate the functionality that was written. So there are still ways that you can create a path to contribution, but make it hard to contribute still. So it's not just a confusing, where's the best place for me to be? What repo do I go to contribute to the docs for Kadena node or for the Kadena wallet signing API? Just having a place where people can go to follow those paths instead of bushwhacking it, like I have through just tons and tons of just effectively just blazing my own trail has been, you need to have a way. There's got to be a way. So that's the invitation.
Well, it sounds like there's lots of great discussion going on and lots of things being brought to the table. And it's obvious that Sterling has some amazing ideas, and Emily and Will are, listening, and very obvious that the Kadena team is there to listen and wants to help further on with these things. So that's really great to hear. We got a little love for Sterling in the chat. So that's very great. Let's transition now to maybe another topic that has been in the forefront from a lot of the community questions, and that is stablecoins. I heard on the last fireside chat that you guys had, maybe it was not the last one, but the one before, that there are other teams working on these things and stuff like that. What do you guys see as the best way to move forward with stablecoins? Because before, there was the chain relay, which brought together KBDC, KETH, and all that stuff, but which has then now been kind of taken away. What do you guys feel is going to be the next step when it comes to stablecoins built on top of Kadena?
I'd say it's two-pronged. One is the more centralized approach, and we've been working with grantees and working with a bunch of other partners. The hard part of the more centralized approach is just getting kind of TVL in it. And that is when the market's collapsing and when FTX is stealing everyone's money, that's really tricky because first we had pretty good, like I had a pretty good setup, and then Luna happened and just collapsed because we were going to be getting Luna onto, we were going to be bridging over, and that was like the big partnership, the big project, and then it just freaking exploded. And then had to go back to the drawing board. One of the things we started working on then was the zero knowledge integration, which has taken longer than we thought it would. But the long-term path for a zero knowledge integration is to do zero knowledge bridges, because one of the things is just who holds the keys, and it'd be great if no one held the keys and that we're just in a zero knowledge proof. So that's why we're doing this integration, because step one is that, and then step two is we need to figure out some like light client stuff, and then step three you can actually do a decentralized and or at least a bridge where no one holds the keys. Like people are holding onto the proofs, but no one's actually doing the signing. And I really like that because I really don't like the approach that some of the other projects have taken to getting the quick and dirty bridge, just because I think it's going to have issues with various government agencies longer term. But there's also the approach of the more centralized one, and we're working with partners. But the hard part of that one is you need to go and get the TVL kind of set up for it. Because otherwise, if you have this thing and you set it up and no one comes, then there isn't any TVL in it in the beginning, and people don't use it, and if no one's using it, then there's no TVL, and it just kind of spirals. So you need to get the first people to throw in, and of course, Kadena Foundation will be putting in a chunk of that, but we also need to get other partners on board, otherwise, it's just not going to get used. So we're lining that up, but it's a BD problem, and then it's still crypto winter, sadly, and it's just hard to go and get people to go and invest in these things right now. My hope is that the recession kind of looks like it's at its bottom, and we'll be able to see more VC money or more just investment into crypto in probably the next 6 months, and that conversation will get a lot easier. I mean, it's already getting easier, but my hope is that it gets a lot easier pretty soon.
Yeah, just quickly to touch on what you're saying about having partners build this stuff. Like you had Lago, one of the grantees, build something, and they were going to bring us the stables. But it happened kind of what you were saying. There was no TVL to begin with. I don't know if you guys had any kind of involvement in understanding what they were building and how they were building it, but it's kind of a flop. Do you guys know why that happened and how can we do better next time?
I do, but I don't know if I'm under a confidentiality thing to be able to say exactly what happened with it. We worked closely with them, tried to set them up as much as possible. It just, I would say, frankly, it's market timing more than anything else. It was a decent idea. It should have worked. And it's just, trying to raise capital last year is basically impossible. And, TVL isn't raising capital, but it's sort of raising capital. And that's just, it just sucks. That's the bad part of crypto winter, is that stuff that needs money, you can't go and get things that need other people to be investing money into, even if it is holding it and getting some return on it. You still need to go and get that. And if it's crypto winter, sometimes you just can't do it. A lot of this stuff, that's the problem with them. That's the hard part of startups. A lot of it's just down to timing. And it's just, I would say that Lago was just the wrong time.
Yeah, because I agree that stablecoins would be a much needed thing on Kadena. For example, on KDSwap, we kind of did the locker feature, and we wanted to kind of expand that to do salaries and that kind of stuff, kind of expand on that. But without stablecoins, it gets really hard. So I think it would be a really cool add-on to that. I don't know if Emily or Sterling, you have anything to add to this topic?
I have nothing to add here. I don't know too much about stablecoins or how to do them right, and I'm not sure I've seen any that actually do work. So.
Yeah, it's really a BD problem. That's the issue.
Yeah, I would say. If I were asked to prioritize things that I want to see on the chain, stablecoins and security tokens would be up there in the top 3. That's all I can add.
I can second that. As a developer, there have been times when I've wanted to use a stablecoin, and simply, I looked at when I first got into Kadena, I saw the KWUSDC, and I was like, "Oh heck yes, I can do it." And then I saw it was depegged. It was 68 cents per
per dollar.
per dollar. I was like, "This is not right." I'm gonna
It's
stay
not,
away. So,
not really stable.
yeah, there are things that I would love to be able to do with stable coins that at the current point in time I simply cannot do.
Yeah, no, we totally need them.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, we totally need them. The problem is like the stable coins we can get. Sometimes we don't want them. A lot of the time because they're usually the algorithmic stables that don't really work. So I would say that there is one thing that's worse than not having stables, and that's having a stable that gets used and breaks. And we're also careful on this. This is again like the color of PRs, like they have security issues. Like stable coins, we can go and get a stablecoin partner. It's just not going to be a very good one, and it'll probably break. And that's worse than not having one, which isn't a great it's not an excuse. Like it's just kind of context. So yeah.
Well, I think that pretty much covers that topic. That's very good insights on where we can move and how we can move forward, and some of the things that happened in the past. Now, going further on to this kind of discussion, let's kind of move towards Pact. We have some questions of like governance impact. When, if ever, are we going to be seeing a change in that? Maybe Emily would like to start off with this question.
Governance and Pact. That's going to be a good one. So there are no concrete plans yet to consider something like open governance, governing the additions to the language. But it is something we have spitballed and we would like to do. We're currently prioritizing things like Pact Core and building out the tooling ecosystem for the language first. Then I think there will be a point where the language is stable enough that people can start asking or voting on additions to the language or different kinds of changes that they want to see. Right now, I would say use the KIP process if you want to see any specific features, which is what people have been doing. Things like the various sorts of encryption or decryption natives or signature support. We do watch those and we add them to the language from time to time. So that's the current process. But I do agree, at a point where this is like, we can consider a stable state for the language, we can probably open it up and we can let people vote on what they want to see. Because at the end of the day, you guys are the developers and you guys are the ones whose experience we are tailoring. So why not?
We've been talking about a Pact Foundation forever. And I think we'll definitely get there, and that's probably how the governance will run. I think at this point, people who want to seriously contribute to Pact and like aid and its like kind of governance and how it's structured, a sufficiently good KIP will probably just get a job offer from us, and like that's just how we're going to do it in the meantime. Until it gets to a certain kind of critical mass of developers who are using it, I don't know if it makes much sense to do the governance, like to roll out a whole foundation with the whole process and a whole bureaucracy around it yet. But that's definitely something that we've been talking about forever and want to do. We just see that as like Pact has matured to Pact is a mature language, and then once that happens, then we roll that governance out, whatever it looks like.
I like both of your answers. I do think the question, maybe it's not well written out, was not about as much as governance in that sense of people voting on what they want to see in Pact, as much as people being able to kind of,
I can speak to this if you'd like. I can break it down for them.
Go ahead, man.
The question was more about governance and smart contracts, and they were asking, when, if ever, are you going to get rid of the ability to upgrade a smart contract to effectively govern it? I'm not sure. It's an interesting question. From my personal point of view, I ask why you would want to get rid of it. Contract upgradability is a very powerful tool.
I would say security concerns. So if you want to do a smart contract that's immutable on the blockchain, you might not want to make it upgradable, and that's kind of the point of the question.
Well, you can make it non-upgradable. It's really easy to do that. You just say gov false. You're done.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's what I'm confused by. Like
So,
We already have. You can make it. You can always just break the upgrade path by just saying false. So
No, but
Yeah.
I think the underlying issue here is
enforce false. Just so
force
no-
false. Yeah.
the underlying issue here is with all of the pack changes. Can we really guarantee that doing that won't make our smart contract, unusable in the future?
Well, there's always this question of whether or not the contract upgrades are going to change the semantics of a particular contract. You have that problem with Solidity. You have that problem in every blockchain. You have to trust the developers at the end of the day, right? There's no real trustless contract out there that hasn't been audited, because even a trustless contract can steal your money. You just acquiesce to interacting with it. At the end of the day, like, we understand that this is a contention in blockchain, right? This is one of the few places where trust is placed in the blockchain in a trustless situation, right? You have to understand what the code is doing before you run it, and you have to look at what you're doing in order to transact on the blockchain. This stuff is forever. So we have at least made it available to you that you can do your due diligence and read the contract for yourself, and have access to the human readable source at the end of the day. But if you're just going to do things mindlessly, like upgrades are a path to being exploited. There's no way around that. You can do things to help yourself. You can fix particular module hashes. You can ask that people abandon governance and enforce a particular version of the contract. But then you have the problem of the blockchain, fees rising, because now everybody's leaving around one-off contracts everywhere and nobody wants to maintain code.
But also, we have like this built into pact where if I import, if I use another module, like another contract in my contract, then we're sucking in that code and we're inlining it. So like, even if this is the whole left pad thing, which was a core conversation we had with about pact in the beginning, which we've also seen on Ethereum be exploited multiple times, where you have some contract that your contract works with, that contract gets updated in a way that exploits your contract.
Yeah.
We don't have that problem, because when I make my contract, it actually copies in the code that it's using from that other contract. And then until I upgrade mine, I'm using the old code. And this is why you do blessed hashes and other stuff, so that you can say, I had to upgrade this because of a security problem. Anyone who's using the old versions are not allowed to interact with this contract until they upgrade. But it also guarantees me as a developer for the contract that's using the one that's above it, that's importing it, that I know that my code is stable in place. And as Emily was talking about with the semantics of a language changing with pact, it's like one of the core things that we backtest the shit out of, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, every time we're doing changes to pact, we run through, I don't know, Emily, do we run through the entirety of Chainweb history to make sure that everything comes out exactly the same?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Like, the best we can do is give you guys the tools to audit for yourself and make that as easy as possible. Like, that's it. The best we can do is that, and the inlining thing is the way that we help you guys. Like, there is no such thing as cascading failures in this system, where somebody decides to be malicious and it creates a series of malicious cascading, exploits.
Yeah, and you can also, by the way, I believe in fact, you can have circular dependencies, because they're temporally different. Because you have module, like, let's say, okay, so I have module A, and module B imports module A, so it sucks up that, so it inlines that code. And then if module A gets upgraded to use module B, it will suck up the code from here up into here, and I believe it brings the inline stuff from the old version of A up here. So you can actually have a circular dependency. Because it's temporally different. Not that you should ever do that. And I'm not 100% sure that's how it works, but I'm like 95% sure that's actually how it works.
Yeah.
So
don't try this at home, kids.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no real reason to do it, but it's just like it's part of like one of the things that came on with the safety of the way that we designed this, because otherwise, developers are going to get screwed at some point. Someone's going to upgrade their contracts. Let's say you had a stable coin contract that couldn't really be trusted, but you thought it could be, or like the developer keys get hacked. They upgrade it, and then that goes and just sucks up all the stuff in your contract. Like, no, it's bullshit. So the easy way to do this is you suck up the code when you deploy your contract, and until you change your contract, you know which version you're running. Also, formal verification wouldn't make any damn sense if you're if the code that you're executing could change without you knowing it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Chris, maybe you want to segue to the next one.
Sure, of course. So another thing that a lot of the community members have been talking about is something that you guys are actually doing really good. I feel like in the past month or two of just being more communicative with the community, but they kind of feel like there isn't a one person they can go to. Emily has stepped up and done a great job of communicating to the community on what's going on behind the scenes. But has there been any thoughts of maybe bringing a community manager that is the direct communication between the community and the team itself?
Yes, please send them to me in any way possible. Yes, we are actively looking for someone like this. I don't know if we have the JD up, but yes, we need a community manager.
Yeah.
And we need someone who can also do community strategy and understands this stuff, and who can also go and just be kind of the front line for the conversation. 100%, we're looking for them. They're just really hard to find. They're not hard to find, but they're hard to find good ones. So if you know someone who's good at this, I'm asking the entire community, just at me on Twitter or try to DM me on any platform that you have able, except for Telegram, because I don't check DMs on Telegram because that's just a shit show. Yeah. But yeah, just even though go onto our Discord and just ping one of the mods there and tell them that Will said to literally do this in the talk, and I have a person, give him this name. Just anything, please.
We're willing to try it out. I mean, trying it out is relatively cheap, but committing to somebody who is not good is definitely what we do not want to do, right? We've had instances of this in the community before where people have just gone off the rails and just said all of the quiet parts out loud. And it hasn't been very pretty. It is very difficult to find people with the infinite amount of patience needed to constantly deal with people who are both happy but also griping all the time. It's genuinely tough. So.
Yeah, I hear that. As a community manager, just for our little small ecosystem over at Eucalyptus Labs, definitely it takes a certain person with a certain tenacity to be able to communicate properly with the community on what the project's goals and aspirations are, and not giving away the whole piece of the pie or the whole pie and just giving them the pieces that they need to eat, kind of thing. So it's great to hear though that you guys are definitely looking for that and trying to expand out to that. So if anyone listening feels like they got the chops, sounds like Will's looking for you. So get out there, get your CVs in, and hopefully maybe we can get ourselves a really sweet community manager that everyone will love and everyone will bring forward. So I don't know if you guys want to maybe step into now some actual community questions now that we've
actually let's go for it.
Sure.
Yeah, all right. So
quick comment, actually, hold on the community.
In
that job description, you should say that they're in charge of GitHub. For
that would be I was about to say we're also looking for a developer relations person, and they'll probably be in charge of GitHub.
Yeah.
Okay.
They could be the same person for a bit.
Yeah, there can always be some overlap, that's for sure. All right, so we got some really good questions here from the community. Let's just kind of start from the top here. Junk Crypto Q has been asking a whole bunch of questions, and there's some really good ones. So what do you see as the biggest potential opportunities for Kadena in the coming years? I don't know if we want to maybe start with Will and go around the table, and you guys can have your shot at it. What do you feel?
I think so. There's at least two things we're rolling out this year that I can't talk about. One of them being, I think, is the biggest opportunity. I'm sorry. We're still doing the strategy for it. That one I think is going to be pretty big. That one I think is going to be huge, and it's different, which is what I like about it. And it plays to our strengths of it is a tech focus and a tech first thing and a new approach to growing the, especially developer community massively, and also being able to get Web3 grown technology into the hands of Web2 developers without having to directly use blockchain at all, actually. But I can't talk about all of it yet. Stuart will be the one who's rolling this out. It's an idea that we've been talking about doing for a long period of time, and now we think it finally makes sense to actually roll out and do. Another one is actually having a much easier to use developer experience for building dApps. This is Kadena.js. I'm super excited to see that actually rolling out. Also, once all the documentation for that rolls out and getting the various different hardware wallets and different like wallet things just kind of like closed off this year, that is when I talk about building foundation during winter, that's what I'm talking about. So like, there is a lot of opportunities comes from that and being able to empower the community to do that. I mean, Kadena is also just scaling. We, manage, our resources incredibly well over the past few years, and we're just, scaling up and adding new people and really being able to build out, these teams so that we can do more. We're really firing on all cylinders in a way that is just really exciting and invigorating to see. Outside of that, I mean, we're going to get stablecoins solved and bridges solved. Hopefully this year. I would say probably definitely this year, but who the fuck knows? Like maybe we get another FTX level meltdown, and then the whole market goes into winter for another year.
God,
I
please
know.
no, please don't even suggest it.
Yeah. So, barring that or barring other unforeseen consequences, like let's say another partner of ours that we're like getting ready to launch with just explodes. Like these should get solved, and that should really be empowering for Kadena and for the community in general. I'd say those are the big three. I know that we had No Pool get announced. I was on vacation, so I actually was reading about it right before this. And I do love the idea of a much more decentralized mining system and also being able to address some of the green issues surrounding mining. So I think that's a big opportunity as well. I do love the decentralized mining approach that you can do with Kadena, and it's going to only get more powerful as time goes on and as we scale up to more and more chains, just because you're sharding out the hash rate across more and more chains. So decentralized mining makes more sense and just works better in that case.
Awesome. Great response. So we got another question that kind of goes back to the repos that we were talking about earlier. Kadena has 114 repos. Which ones are still relevant?
114.
A lot of repos to go through.
Feel this. Yes. Trying to find where to contribute again. It's been
oh my God.
Tough.
It really grew, didn't it?
We don't really have any controls over like repos that get made. And I don't think we ever should, because just a lot of it can be really useful for historical just things. Like I made this on testnet, this kind of Reddit / kind of DAO thing maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I still point people to it that are like friends of mine that are like picking up Pact. And I still point them to it as like, here is a Reddit built in Pact. Like go and look at the code, because this like you already understand how Reddit works. So like this will like help you to understand how Pact works. Mm-hmm. So I'm not really a big fan of like just deleting these things just for clarity. I mean, the way to look at it is you probably look at what's recent. And then I go by like, that, and you just kind of search.
You can pin repos.
A lot of these are also just Haskell dependencies that we own. So
we had to eat a bunch of Haskell dependencies.
Yeah. But a lot of them are just projects that we've done for people, that POCs that we want to live, in existing or exist in some concrete format somewhere, or, just stuff that we've worked on. We can do a little bit of work here, I think, pinning the major projects. But a lot of this is just history. This is how much stuff we've been working on constantly. And nearly all of it has paid off, in some shape or form at one point or another, right? Ranging from infrastructure to dependencies that we've vendored in to, various JS projects and contracts that we're writing for people, or, examples and tutorials and that kind of thing. I think they just need to be consolidated. So.
Yeah, I think just simply pinning them would probably go a big way of the main ones for people to try to contribute to. Just, might really, instead of having to go through all 100 and something of them looking for what you need, just might be a simple way to make it easier for people to find.
Kadena.js, I think, is the big one. Like that's the one where I think we have the most people, because the other issue we have with contributions is that we're a Haskell shop, and this has allowed us to accelerate and have some very advanced technology and some very amazing technologists on staff that we otherwise wouldn't have had access to, because we get to just be nerds with Haskell and just do cool stuff, and also not sell out anyone's privacy. Which I don't know if I've talked about this at all, but like one of the things I love about crypto is like I don't have to sell anyone's privacy. It's really nice to be able to work in tech and not have to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the problem is that like Haskell is not an easy language. I had to take 3 months off work to go to hacker school, literally. Now it's called Recurse Center in New York, and I just focused on Haskell and basically just did wax on, wax off for a month and a half, building a scheme. And at the end of it, I'm like, all right, now I know kung fu. Like I understand how to do this, but it's non-trivial. So this is also one of the issues with contributions. Like there just aren't that many Haskell developers. And someday maybe we do, a Rust node and we do Rust Pact. And for those people, we might actually have a much easier time getting people to contribute. But there is definitely a language choice thing that's also holding back broader contributions, just because there aren't tons of Haskell developers. That being said, the developers who are watching this, learning Haskell is totally worth it. Like it's pain in the butt. But the documentation, all the tooling, and everything is way better now, and it's totally worth it. It'll make all of your code better. Like in every direction.
Okay. Now, one question I wanted to segue into, because I'm really curious about this one. Actually, I don't have the guy who asked it, but Will, why is Ziki a better L2 solution than Kuro? And is it, first of all?
It's a different solution. I would say that, so ZK is one path for doing layer 2. Kuro, it really just like a side chain, is a just different path for a different use case. Zero knowledge can be very good for doing things like bridges, or if you have a like a DApp that is, if you're hitting certain scaling issues, then ZK can make a lot of sense as like a next step for going to. Whereas, like one of the nice parts of the ZK approach is that you don't have to run a cluster. This is one of the issues that I have with the approach of, like building out applications in Cosmos. And I love Cosmos. I always have, and I've always said this. Like, I really like what they're doing. I love their community. Like, Suki is amazing. The whole team is freaking amazing. Like, they've done great stuff. It's just that, like, to build an app on Cosmos, you need to, basically like run a blockchain, and that's a pain in the butt. Like, that is not to be underestimated. So, a good example of this is like DYDX, because we have some friends there. And they initially were on chain on Ethereum, and then they went zero knowledge, layer 2 off of Ethereum, and then they finally moved to the Cosmos ecosystem after they had this like massive TVL and all this other stuff, partially because they were at the scale where it made sense to actually run their own like side blockchain and maintain it. But this is, to me, a progression path. So it's not really you use this versus this. It's like as your app grows, it makes more and more sense for you to run your own dedicated blockchain on the side that is dedicated to this, that is linked to some hub. But going immediately to that is a massive pain in the butt. So I would say that ZK is kind of like one of the steps in that progression as your app is successful.
Okay, so you kind of changed direction on this for Kuro, right? Because when I last spoke with you, Emily, you had a timeline of last year to start working on it, but maybe now with ZK you're kind of holding back a little bit, I guess, on this one.
Yeah. This I had offered to volunteer for it, but became extremely clear to me that it would no one would have maintained it after I had done it. No one even bothered trying to pick it up or help. So the fact that the ZK stuff came along was actually just more of we can just do this, and this would be this would open up doors that Kuro would not, right? Because now we have the ability for people to start doing like layer 2 commitment schemes and kind of roll up type things and apply for grants. And it just seems like a better idea all around to just go all in on this. Kuro itself is fantastic, but it is just a layer 2. And it seems like people don't really want to do the hybrid blockchain thing anymore. There was exactly one person in the ecosystem who was really gunning for it, and they ended up not delivering anything, as far as I know. So.
That's a big part of it with Kuro, is that like if there is like real demand for it, then it's something that we can pour a bunch of resources into. But people really don't want to do it that much, and right now, like layer 1 is enough scale for most applications that people want to build right now. I would say almost all of them at this point.
We've got 20 Bitcoins lined up next to each other. Like, what's not good about that?
One of the things I want to talk about this, because there was this meme of for 20,000 TPS or whatever that always goes around, but in reality that's not the real speed of the network, nor it needs to be, in my opinion. But user perception is that the Kadena blockchain is a little bit slow. So while I think like for most of the dApps that we have running on Kadena, speed is not a necessity. It kind of throws people off when they're using, like, new users that are used to centralized tools. Go to make a swap on a DEX, and they have to wait like 1 minute for it to go by, and this is too slow, it's never going to be the future. So do you think this is an issue, and do you think we can in any way speed things up a little bit in the future?
So it's where you're talking about two different things technically. There's latency and there's throughput. And so there's like TPS is throughput, and then you have latency. So, to get a blockchain to get a properly decentralized blockchain like we have, like a proof of work network, below, I don't know, maybe like a minute for confirmation is pretty tricky / doesn't really work. And there's a bunch of just kind of technical, like just network reasons for that. You can maybe get it down to like half a minute, but really, like, you're never going to hit like a second that you'll see on the proof of stake networks. Yeah. Now the trade-off is that the proof of stake networks, I'd say like a third to maybe half of the voting rights on those networks for their governance is controlled by major VCs, and they're very centralized systems. Even though they say they're decentralized, that's just like so that the regulators don't come and beat down their doors, but they're not decentralized. They're extremely centralized, especially just in like the node operation of it. So like those are things that we believe in decentralization, and that is just one of the core tenets of Kadena, and one of the parts that one of the things that happens as a consequence is that the latency is just going to be higher. So the way that you solve this is with various layer 2 things like zero knowledge, or you do a side chain that has much higher performance, or you do something closer to Taproot, which you actually have the technology to do now on Kadena, just that no one's doing it. Mostly because I think we haven't done a demo for it, and also I don't think we've really seen a need. But you could do something very, very similar to Taproot, just with pacts and with just key sets and guards. So that's kind of the difference. And then when we talk about a TPS, this is also one of the issues we had when we were freaking pitching to VCs early on. We have a system that horizontally scales infinitely. So, how do you you can't even take an average between, you have a 10 chain variant that runs at, 500 transactions a second, something like that. And then you have a infinite version, or one that approaches infinity in the limit. So like, even if you take an average of those two numbers, your number is still infinite. So like, okay, what number do we use? So yeah, like, it's just, that was also one of the hard things. Like, there is nuance to this. And also because you talk about like latency, and then talk about decentralization, then you talk about, just like, okay, we can definitely run a multi-billion chain network. Well, I don't think we ever would want to, but if we needed to, we could do it. It would just be nuts. And it would have like insane throughput. So that's like, it's one of the hard parts of it. It's just like, okay, how do you boil this thing that is nuanced into a number?
Okay.
It's also, if I could interject just to add some more color to Will's comments, we're also talking about a network that can handle smart contracts. Often what you'll see is that people are making these claims about like extremely fast, confirmation times, low latency, and I don't want to get into Casper.
No, but that's what everyone's thinking, right?
Yeah. But their assumptions are fundamentally the thing that keeps confirmation and latency times down, which is the blocks do nothing, and they are at a fixed size of 1 megabyte, and then they can be gossiped around quite quickly and confirmed, but they're not doing anything. And that's the important thing to remember. We are a smart contract system. We are going to, and we can execute our contracts, or our individual blocks in something like 5 to 10 seconds. We have a 30-second latency period for gossip. And then, not latency period. We have a certain amount of time for those blocks to be accepted and then confirmed within a 30-second period. But the actual execution time is something like 5-ish seconds on average. As soon as somebody starts bolting on a contract language and has to expand the size of those blocks, the gossip period, the latency period goes up, as well as the runtime, the execution for each of those blocks, which will necessarily put the confirmation time higher than any of the current claims on the market. So it's the fact that we're already there. We shipped with a smart contract language and an interpreter that could execute, and a mempool and all this stuff working together that gets you a final product that's usable. And compared apples to apples for other places like Ethereum, say take one chain on Kadena and compare it to Ethereum, we're going faster.
Okay.
We can improve latency, we can improve the mempool, sure, but when it comes to actual contract execution, we're winning.
Nice. Okay.
So.
Good answer. Maybe we can go. There's a question here for Sterling, actually. No, not this one. Sorry. Do you have the question, Chris, for Sterling there?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. What are 3 things that would make Luxottica Sterling passionately return to building on Kadena? What are your top 3 things that you would like to see happen that would make you want to stick around? Because we would love to have you stick around, that's for sure.
That is a good question.
Hiring someone to handle GitHub requests.
Yeah,
I already tried to hire Sterling. It didn't work.
Well, I asked for autonomy. I don't know. That conversation didn't go very far, I'll be honest. Let's see. Yeah, I do want to pursue my own dreams. I decided when I left LZ Tech that I would work for others only if I truly needed the money and if I truly believed in the vision. So I try my best to stick to that. As far as returning passionately to Kadena, 3 things. I guess just working on my onion, right? 1, 2, 3. Step 1 is have tools in place that make it very easy to build dApps that scale as the chain scales. That would be step number 1. That would also include resolving. Yeah, GitHub guy gal. Yeah, that would also include resolving a lot of the what I see as kind of some of the major issues in the Kadena core protocol, such as right now you can request a gas limit of 15,000 or 150,000, but only use 250, but the block still reserves 150,000. And so that's one of these things that makes it feel really slow, is because developers are like, oh, I don't want my transaction to fail, so I'll just set the gas limit really high, not realizing that, at least in the initial bit, that it's actually clogging up the entire chain. So that's things like this where you could, I don't know how easy it is to solve that, honestly. I don't write Haskell. I tried to read some of the Haskell code. I think I got a little bit of it, but there's no way I could fix a problem like that. So things like this, where just getting the core chain to the point where it's easy, you can scale it up and it is fast as well. Or I should say not fast, responsive. And that there aren't any hidden gotchas like the gas thing.
Well, the gas thing, if I'm going to come back at that real quick, it's important to understand why the gas thing is a thing in the first place. If you look at mempools have to create an economy for the miners. And the miners are the people at the end of the day who are going to be the ones who adopt blocks, and the mempools have to be configured such that they are producing blocks that are going to be attractive to miners. And one of the ways you do that is you pick the transactions with the highest fees, because that's going to be the highest reward for miners, right?
I understand that.
So when you are configuring your nodes, you can make changes to the code. It is open source. You can say what the mempool block assembly policy is going to look like. You can do a replace by fee thing, which is the default, or you can implement something more interesting, like a child pays for parent style policy. You can, block certain fees that are too high, and you have full control of your node. It's up to you to actually modify it. And that's what happens in every other ecosystem. People are actually running nodes with special mempools that makes sense for the miner economy they're trying to target. But nobody seems to have done that in Kadena yet. And I'm actually quite interested as to why. We kind of pick up the default and we say, well, this is suboptimal, and then just drop it. So why hasn't anyone picked up this thing and tried to do something like a Bitcoin Nitro or alternative mempool configuration?
We need more people, I think. We need more people to come and join and try those things.
Yeah,
I'd also throw out there's a feature that hasn't rolled out yet for this, which is the whole local thing that Emily was working on before.
It's on testnet. It's on testnet.
It's on testnet. It just isn't rolled out yet. And this will allow you to, without signatures, just run a transaction and see how much gas it'll literally cost, and also if it'll work. It's something we should have had a while ago. And once that's rolled into mainnet, and then once rolled into Kadena.js, there will just be a thing that a developer can go and hit this API, check how much gas the thing is actually going to need, and then just use that and then say, if it were me, I'd probably add 10% to it just in case. Just in case something has changed, some contract, some transaction went through and thus the gas changed a little bit. And then this will help in a big, big way. Because we don't have a way of estimating gas costs in a really consistent way when they hit the network. So
that 10% is a developer's thing, because me as a mechanical engineer, I would put double just to make sure. Just to know that it won't fail.
So, well, now you can say, I'm going to construct my transactions, but I'm going to send it through this local API first and get a good estimate, and then do whatever modifications you need to.
I'm going to fight back on that immediately and say that it doesn't work, because then you have to sign the transaction twice. I've already tried.
No, you don't sign the transaction. That's what I just told you. You don't have to sign the transaction.
I fixed that.
All right.
We've been pissed off about it too. It's been something we've wanted for a while.
This is what I've been spending the last 3 months on. It's now you have an API. If you go into the API docs for Pact, now you have an API for local that allows you to simulate as if you were sending to the send endpoint, but also you can turn off signature verification so you can use it in detached signature format. So your signing API problems are actually fixed with this release, as is the gas estimation problem.
Okay.
Up to, of course, random and indeterminacy in the block assembly process.
So, question then, going back to my original statement about gas limit then, I have the ability to send a transaction to a node that literally has the packed code hello world in a string form. I can request 150,000 gas for this transaction. And the block that my transaction is put into reserves 150,000 gas for that around 250 gas transaction. What this means is that I have effectively blocked out, I have done a denial of service attack on the Kadena chain with 150,000 gas taken out of every single block for approximately just a couple pennies. And I can do that for an entire day, for an entire chain, for around 72 KDA based on my calculations. I have effectively denial of service one entire chain for $72 in a day. That's nothing. So that's the issue I'm trying to get at. It's not, and maybe you fixed it with Pack 4.6. I don't know, but
that's an economy.
That's the gas limit I'm talking about. I'm not talking about gas limit calculation. I'm just saying right now the gas limit is incorrectly used to reserve that amount in a block, and it's not helpful to the block either, because they only got paid 250 gas for that. That's useless to them. So lied to effectively by whatever developer wants to put the gas limit at.
I agree that this is a problem, right? This is something where if we were to hire for the mempool, this particular issue is solved in other chains by basically taking a look at the discrepancy between the gas limit that's being set and then the gas cost of the actual transaction, and finding some nice tolerance interval between the two. And we need to do that in our mempool. So I agree.
Okay, good. We're getting somewhere.
I need to double check with Lars. I'm not entirely sure that that's accurate, but I need to double check with Lars because I know we talked about this before because it was happening.
No, we do it because we expect node operators to be and miners to sort of fend for themselves a little bit, right? They have to have policies in place that make sure that this kind of thing can't happen, right? We are trying to be as hands-off and as less paternalistic about mempool policy than we are, say, about packed code. if there is somebody who is doing this, you can blacklist their IP, and you know that would be the solution to the DOS vector that you're describing. If you see somebody constantly submitting in low value, high gas limit transactions, just block them. But it turns out that people are not the most sophisticated node operators in the world, so maybe we put a little training wheels on it, and we fix that. But ideally, you would monitor your transactions, and you would note that miners are not flocking to your blocks anymore because the blocks you're assembling are kind of shit. So,
okay,
Oh,
we're approaching the end of our show now. So we're gonna do one more question, which I think it's a good one to end on a high note. So John CryptoQ asks, what has been Kadena's approach to developing partnerships with other companies and organizations in the blockchain space? And if we can add a little bit to this so that Sterling can also join, what's kind of your strategy to bring people to Kadena? And Sterling, what do you think is lacking in that regards? If you have any opinion on that, of course.
Who's going to jump?
Maybe start
Yeah.
with Will.
Yeah,
on this
sorry,
one?
I was just texting Lars to double check whether or not that thing from before was right.
It's stuck in his head.
Yeah, no, 'cause I swear to God we talked about this before, but I don't know if it got fixed. Yeah, I mean, our approach, we have a BD team. They go out and try to find like good partners. A lot of this is driven by finding funds to co-invest with. It's very nice being post, the VC raise phase for Kadena, and instead of, just like co-investing into the ecosystem with them. A fair bit of it is trying to nurture and incubate grantees and just build them up. Definitely things that we want to change on that front are just having a allocated marketing budget for them, so they can be assisted with, like when they roll out or when they announce, like we can help to amplify their message and to build their community for them. This is something we didn't used to do, and with one of the CMO candidates we were talking with, he was saying, it's like, look, this is just like you got to do this with everyone, otherwise, like it's just really hard to get grantees to actually, be successful, which is a really good idea. That's also why we're looking for a CMO. What else? Can you put the question back up? Just because otherwise, like,
Sure.
on it.
Sure.
Nope.
Yeah. I mean, those are probably, I think those are like some of the big ones. There's definitely opportunities just being crypto winter, being able to get more attention from groups that otherwise we'd have a much harder time with. So, for example, working with Electron Labs, until Luna blew up, we couldn't get on their roadmap for integrations. And then Luna blew up, and I immediately just texted the founder and was like, yo, can we work with you now? Because there's an empty seat at your table. Can we join it? So like, that is an example of just like being able to actually go and, make things happen. Last year has been, of course, rough for everyone. And a lot of people that we were talking with, had money in FTX. So things just like basically most of like just all of Q4 got shot from a BD perspective. There's other stuff, but this goes back to the thing that we're planning to do with PAC that I can't talk about. And that's probably going to be the biggest one for like how we actually get PAC in places that you would never expect PAC to be in, that like are nowhere near ready for crypto yet. We have this idea for what we can do with it. That's a big one. And
Will, just to finish off on this thought, what is the so this is all of you in Kadena speaking about this, but there's Kadena Echo, which is kind of a separate thing. What's their involvement in this, and are they actively doing the same, trying to search partners and people to invest in the ecosystem, or is this
Kadena Eco is kind of like the brand for like the BD arm? And initially it was going to be something, and that just didn't work because crypto winter happened. And I think if we had started like a year before, it would have been what we had initially envisioned it to be. Instead, really, I just talk about BD at this point. And Kadena Eco, you can just really think of it as like that's just like the BD arm that eventually we will spin off into be its own thing, but it just isn't at that stage yet.
Okay. I don't know, Emily or Sterling, you have any to add to this?
Not really at the moment.
Speaking specifically to the question that you posed me as part of this, just like what would get developers here, I believe was the question.
Yep.
Yeah, so speaking just from my own personal perspective, let's see if I can walk through the steps necessary just to get a lot of developers. Thing number one is you have your very early adopters who just purely believe in the vision. And I think a lot of those people are already here. And that's kind of phase one. Phase two is you need to start bringing in money. And so the grantees and everything like that is going to really push this through, where you can bring in more developers because you can actually pay the developers to work. There's not very many developers who are going to work for free for extended periods of time or for not that much money, because they can make a lot of money elsewhere. A good Web3 developer can make a lot of money if they play their cards right. And so having the money in the ecosystem will also bring a lot of developers. I'd say, again, a massive part of this is making it easy to onboard developers and building the tools necessary for it to be it just works kind of system, where you plug in all the things, you write your smart contract, you say, I want this to work on these 4 chains, I'm able to deploy on those chains, I want it so it can scale easily, and it just works. I've got tools that finish my cross-chain transactions, because anyone who's trying to make a large ecosystem or have a lot of transactions is going to want these tools, because if they don't, then it doesn't scale. So whether that be having a layer 2 that uses ZK rollups to communicate with the layer 1 and be very much faster than the layer 1, as Will described previously. All of these tools are just things that people are going to want and that they're going to need, otherwise they're going to get disheartened, especially if they're trying to blaze trails to make it happen. And again, especially if they don't have any money to back them as they blaze that trail. So just get your early adopters, really support them, get the money into the ecosystem, build the tools necessary so that it's just such a nice experience to build on Kadena. You just click a couple of buttons, you write your smart contract, you deploy, you link it up really easily using Kadena.js. It'd be nice. It'd be amazing if it felt like deploying on Ethereum.
Well, it sounds like we're on the way to that. Rome isn't built in a day, and it sounds like the Kadena team has been very good at listening to these suggestions from the community, and it sounds like they're taking it to heart and wanting to build for the community, because really that is what they're building this whole blockchain and ecosystem for, is for people like us and the community to use it and utilize it in the best way possible. So I think this has been an absolutely great conversation. I think I want to definitely thank everyone for coming. Thank Will and Emily and Sterling for joining me and Alfonso here for this amazing talk. We will have more of these in the future, so do not worry, community. There will be more KD Talks, but I think that's going to conclude our first video. We hope you guys found these discussions informative, insightful, and help gain a better understanding of what the Kadena blockchain and technology holds and what the team has been up to. Again, we want to thank special thanks to our expert panel of Emily, Will, and Sterling for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. Their contributions are invaluable for helping us explore the many features and benefits of the Kadena blockchain. And it's something that we cannot take for granted, and it's something that is very special. So we want to thank also our viewers for tuning in and submitting their questions. I'm sorry that we did not get around to all of them. We are time constrained, but you can always join the Kadena Discord and present your questions to the team there, as they're very informative and very talkative and open to the community. So we want to thank everyone. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just saying that they have been doing a lot of AMAs as well, so I'm sure there will be a lot of opportunities to ask them questions. Just a quick shout out to all of our supporting cast that it's not on camera as well, and a special shout out to the Kadena sisters as well. I'm sure they're having a blast.
Yes. So if you guys have any further questions, like I said, make sure you guys follow Kadena on all their socials, join their Twitter, join their Discord, get involved. Also, make sure to follow KD Launch, KD Swap, Kadena Ecosystem. All those links for everything can be found in the description below the video. And definitely stay tuned, because we plan on having more of these KD Talk little AMAs with the team. And hopefully we'll be able to get more questions answered from the community. So once again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, Will, Sterling, and Emily especially. And it's been a great conversation, and thank you for coming. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having
you
me.
guys.
Cheers.
See you
See
soon.
ya.
Thanks, everyone. Take
See ya.
care.